What about Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper? Would he kill 13 women? Like, how did they end up good friends with this man? Because I think it was in your book where he talks about they had to take images of his teeth, like mould his teeth, because apparently there was teeth marks on these girls that could actually have been Jimmy Savile. Is that correct?
Well, there were bite marks on some of the victims, and so he met Sutcliffe. I think the first time was on a prison visit to the Isle of Wight. I think that's where he was sent first, Sutcliffe. And then when he was at Broadmoor, I mean, Savile was in and out of Broadmoor all the time, and he met Sutcliffe a lot. And he always said, "Oh, Peter, he was as good as gold." And I says, "Well, he wasn't really as good as gold, was he? I mean, he killed quite. Not really as good as gold. Let's face it. You know, he was quite a bad man, and like he would talk about these people being sort of overtaken by impulses, and they weren't bad. They were like they were sort of at the mercy of these impulses that overtook them. So he would refuse to sort of say that Sutcliffe was a bad man. Anyway, during before Sutcliffe was caught, or before anybody knew who Peter Sutcliffe was, during the Ripper manhunt, I mean, a lot of men in Yorkshire and Manchester and all around there were called in. I mean, the police interviewed hundreds and hundreds and called people in. But one of the victims was found very close to his flat in Roundhay Park. And Savile was known, there were police reports that he was known for sort of being in and around Roundhay. I think not Roundhay, where was it? Chapeltown in Leeds, which was sort of area a lot of prostitutes were. I think there were bite marks on this victim, and he was called in, and they did take mould of his teeth, because he was probably like a lot of other people. He was interviewed by the police, but whether he was a big sort of suspect or not, I don't know. But he certainly sort of, I remember somebody from the police said to me he was very excited, when this body was found, basically outside his house in Roundhay Park.
Could they have been friends before Sutcliffe went to prison? Like some sort of trophy, some sick, satanic kind of weird fetish of leave the body next to my house. Listen, I'm just going off.
I've got no idea about that. I mean, I would have thought it's pretty unlikely, but then again, Jimmy Savile's story is pretty unlikely. I certainly didn't have any evidence for that. But they did take it seriously enough to take a mould of his teeth, and they did have, intelligence on him that he was, frequenting Chapeltown, or the main red light area in Leeds. So there was police intelligence on him. He wasn't like somebody who was completely whiter than white. And there was police intelligence on him for a long, long time at various police forces. And that was because of this fact that he moved around all the time.
How can he be friends with a serial killer? That man murdered 13 innocent women. Like, it doesn't make sense. I'm laughing because it's fucking crazy. Like, this is a high-profile figure. One of the biggest celebrities in the UK, if not the biggest, is then friends with a man who's then killed innocent people. But then when he speaks about him, he says he's a good person, he's this and that, it's only impulses. Could he possibly be speaking about himself when he speaks about these people?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I think, why Broadmoor? Why Broadmoor? I mean, Stoke Mandeville, he was in the spinal injuries unit. There were people who were paralysed and couldn't move. I mean, talk about vulnerable. Broadmoor, I feel that with Broadmoor, the deeper he went there and the more he tried to find out and the more he looked and the more he spoke to people, and he ended up being basically the boss of Broadmoor. Thatcher's government put him in charge of a task force to take over Broadmoor when Broadmoor and a lot of the special hospitals were in sort of disarray. He was put in charge of a task force. He was the governor, and he fell out with, because it was run by the prison officers union. It wasn't like nurses; they weren't psychiatric nurses. There were psychiatric nurses there, but the prison officers ran the place. And Savile was hugely unpopular with them because he just sort of got rid of loads of them, and he just sort of cracked down on them. But I do think what you said is a very high possibility, in the sense that he wanted to understand how people were diagnosed, how people were treated, what sort of tells there were, if you like, for that sort of behaviour, because there were plenty of, serial sex offenders inside Broadmoor that he could get an understanding of perhaps how their minds was similar to his, worked, how they were treated, how they were identified. Is it another layer of this sort of insurance policy to actually be able to, understand how these people were caught or what mistakes they made, or even, just to gravitate, I think, sex offenders seem to gravitate towards each other, doesn't it? And I think that there was probably that gravitational pull for him as well with some of those people. How much he was friends with Peter Sutcliffe, I don't know. I think Peter Sutcliffe was like a bit of a trophy association, a bit like a lot of these other people. It made him look even more interesting that on the one hand, he was, Prince Charles's, inner circle advisor. And on the other hand, he's like, he's rubbing shoulders with Peter Sutcliffe in Broadmoor, maybe even in the same week.
Was he educating himself with these psychopaths to then learn and not make the same mistakes as them? Or is it a possibility he got the kicks out of them telling their stories of the hideous things that they've done? Probably both. I think
probably both, yeah. I think there was definitely a sense that he wanted to understand how, the sort of like pathology almost of a psychopath. And I think he was, he ticked so many of the boxes for the sort of identification of a psychopath. I do think he was. And I think that he was interested in other people probably like him. And I think that the more he could understand about, not only how they were treated, but how they were caught and what sort of impulses led to their capture, led to them, being jailed or hospitalized or given sort of life sentences, then the more he could probably avoid that.
How does a presenter get the keys to Broadmoor? Like, what was the rumours of, was there anyone ever come forward? The thing about Broadmoor, I always speak about this woman as well, Barbara O'Hare.
Right.
She wrote the book The Hospital. She exposed the hospital. Where was this place? Aston Hall.
Right.
And what the evil doctors used to do, they used to have a checklist, get the kids from the broken home, addict parents, these kids are kind of addicts themselves very young, so they could sign them off as crazy. So when the kids were running away and exposing it, they would just take them straight back because they were signed off as nutcases. So was that part of his plan as well, to get the keys for Broadmoor so they could manipulate people, abuse people, or was it not as...
I don't know. I mean, I think it wasn't just Broadmoor. He was involved with, was it Rampton, the other special hospital? He took like parties out of special hospitals for, visits to the seaside and stuff like that. He had the power to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take a busload of, not convicted, but like certified dangerous, mentally ill people, and I will take them to the seaside for a trip to see Peter Giaconelli and my mum at Scarborough. And he had that ability to, turn up when he wanted, park his motorhome in the grounds, had the keys, could walk in and out pretty much onto any wing that he wanted. And there were reports of him like, loitering around the women's wing and like at bath time and stuff like that, and just sort of like standing there looking and leering and whatever else. I mean, he just had the run of the place. I mean, he had the run of Leeds General Infirmary, he had the run of Stoke Mandeville, he had the run of Broadmoor. He had, and there were these weren't the only hospitals.